And once again, we thank you for joining us for today's online book launch. We know that we have a lot of people calling in from many different places around the world, from Australia to USA to India, even to Hong Kong. And I think what's really great is that it really shows this collaboration that we've all had together for the book called Challenges for Chinese Women. And I would also like to congratulate all the contributors because the book is finally published, and you should be receiving your contributor copies soon in hard physical book. You'll be receiving that one soon, so that's very exciting. So my name is Amy. I'm from World Scientific. I am currently the marketing executive for the book, and I also cover Asian studies and social sciences. And it's been such a privilege to work with Dr. 𝘾𝙗𝙞 on this in order for me to help her with the review processes and as well as marketing of the book overseas. And what we're hoping and looking forward to is that today's book launch will be able to give the contributors an opportunity to share their research with one another, as well as have an insightful panel discussion and maybe discuss more about how can we continue to bring this book and its research out into more libraries and more universities across the world. So I would like to also introduce Dr. Pan Wang, who will be today's moderator. She's from the University of New South Wales, Australia, and she will be the moderator for today's panel discussion. And I would also like to introduce the contributors who have willingly decided to, stay up late and log in at this wonderful timing. So the first one I would like to introduce is Dr. Govind Kelkar and Dr. Ritu Agarwal. They are from the GenDev Center for Research and Innovation of Jawaharlal, for Research and Innovation, as well as Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. So their chapter is called Inequalities Persist, Policies and Social Constructs in Women's Land Rights. So later on, they will be sharing a bit more about their chapter. I would also like to introduce Dr. 𝘾𝙗𝙞, who is from the Hong Kong Shue University. Her chapter, along with Dr. Sinha, talks about women and divorce, institutional constraints and outcomes. And then I would like to introduce also Professor Cindy Fan from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, whose focus is mainly on migration, marriage, and split households. And this will also be shared with her later on. So right now, we also have one more contributor who's joining, but in the meantime, I would like to pass it on to Dr. Pan Wang to begin the sharing and moderated panel.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone, and hi from Sydney. So for the next 10 to 12 minutes, we'll have our authors briefly introduce their chapter and the key arguments. And can we start from maybe by order, chapter 6 from Professor Cindy Fan? And each of our authors will spend around 3 minutes going through their chapter and arguments with us. So we will gain a main idea about each chapter.
Thank you, Pan. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start by just thanking the editor of the book, Professor 𝘾𝙗𝙞, and also World Scientific Publishing for publishing the book, and also Pan for moderating, and thank you, Amy, to represent World Scientific Publishing here. So let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see it. And if you want me to change anything, just let me know. Okay, so because we only have a few minutes per chapter, I'm gonna just jump right in and actually use a couple of stories to illustrate my argument. So this chapter really has to do with the nexus between marriage, migration, and split households. So what you're seeing here is a story of a woman over 30 years, about 30 years. So her name is Ying-Yue, and she got married and had 2 children. And then I want to draw your attention to this column, which is the first letter represents the location of the wife. The second letter, so I is inside. The second letter represents the location of the husband. So I is inside and O is outside, the countryside or village. And so when they got married, both were inside, and then the husband decided to go out to work, and that's beginning the inside-outside or split household arrangement. And the wife stayed inside, left behind, and when the daughter was 14, she quit school and stayed home to care for her little brother, and while both parents went outside to work. Okay, then starting another kind of split household. And the daughter stayed home, but the son eventually went to university because the daughter stayed home to kind of care for him. And then when the son got married and gave birth, his wife gave birth to a son, basically a grandchild. Both parents came home, and the mother, Yin-Wei, continued to give care, right, to the grandson, including when the son moved to the city, she moved with them. So for 30 years, Yin-Yue had not stopped basically caregiving, okay, even though her location has changed. But this story also illustrates how the household members collaborate and so practice division of labor in order to so-called household as a verb, right, to practice householding. The next story is not really a story, but I just want to share a quote of a sort of a more recent situation in which, and I'm going to just highlight part of the quote. Okay, so this is the father of the family. And he said, building a new house was for the purpose of my son's getting married. Okay, and the house was built with the money from migrant work by the two of us and our son and daughter. And this was interview done in Sichuan in 2024. So basically the story is that in order for the son to get married, especially given the very high sex ratio at birth, throughout China, but particularly in the countryside, the marriage market is extremely competitive. So there's actually a link between migrant work and the son getting married. So migrant work is not only just a means to lift people out of poverty and to improve economic standard of living of the family, but also is an essential source of funding to support the family to build a house or to finance or fund bride price in order for the son to get married. So, you would think that the scarcity of women is going to increase their status, but it's kind of, in a sense, actually reinforcing the patriarchy and reinforcing the gendered hypergamy of marriage and reinforcing the transactional nature of marriage. So I'm just gonna maybe just summarize some of the main arguments of my chapter, that even though it is about the nexus among migration, marriage, and split households, the sort of overall context is such that even in China, women have surpassed men in college enrollment since 2009 and had improved educational attainment significantly. But as the story that I just shared, and there are many other stories, similar stories, the women and girls are left behind geographically and or in terms of opportunities such as education if there is a male sibling in the family. And that gendered hypergamy persists. As I mentioned, this transactional concept of marriage continue to be very pronounced, maybe even more so. I didn't have a chance to talk about the urban areas, but in the urban areas, women who are high achieving are often considered left over because of hypergamy. They have a hard time finding men of similar status or even higher status. So in general, in Chinese society, we are now seeing later and fewer marriages, decline in fertility, rise in single living, and never married and divorced. So I would leave everyone with a question, and that is, are we seeing a fundamental culture change in marriage and family in China? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Cindy. And now, with the focus on the countryside as well, and that provides a perfect link to our second speaker, Professor Govind Kalkar and Ritu Agawa, who is going to talk about women's land rights in China. So, Professor,
thank you very much. To the organizers, to Gordana, to the publishers, we are very grateful that this has been kind of taken to this level, and the book looks great. Now we are going to talk in such a short time. The chapter calls Inequalities Persist. Policies, and this is really goes from the what Cindy has pointed out earlier, that why there is this kind of happening. And I have been also wondering that why this kind of persistence of the inequalities in a country like China, which has done a tremendous job in terms of women's liberation. So we start with can we put the next slide, please? This is the major slide. Why the study? This is the question. The gender-based inequalities are maintained and perpetuated through the norms and are stated to be slow-moving institutions when compared with policy-making changes. We covered the policy right from the liberation of China in 1950s and how the attempt was made really through legal and other measures to liberate women, but yet there are fundamental problems. So our research methods included fieldwork, data collected by the two authors. We have been going to China for a number of times, and available material in Chinese and English, including China Women's News and Women of China. So their songs, their writings, their analysis, descriptive, all this kind of we have consulted. The women's voices, what we call. Now, to overcome gender norms, then we look at the policies and changes what were made since 1950s. So from 1950 to 2022, we really looked at the policy statement made by including President Xi Jinping, and the most important law at that time was, our policy statement was 2022, that how the gender equality within family and the community was stressed. Yet the policies and laws. So our question was whether there was something wrong with the policies or there was something wrong with the social norms, which I call social construct. And we find that probably both are at kind of, which I'll come to the conclusion, there is some problem, challenges in both. So throughout these years, throughout these decades from 1950 to 22, we find the Chinese women rejected the policies, suggestions that were made. They find it not rejected, but they question policy suggestions, saying that they were asked to rearrange their time to attend both housework and contracted work in agriculture. The reason I am talking of the agriculture is because we are talking of the rural women and not the kind of, I have not taken account of the urbanization, though we are familiar with that. So how this contracted work and the kind of taking care of the household work was, or unpaid care, which is called, was taken as the women's duty and responsibility. And this is probably one of the reasons which I am coming to point out, which is happening even today when women are asked to produce children, to take care of home. There were these virtues of good family, good wives, they off and on, they were repeatedly kind of brought back to to women. In feminist analysis, this is called marriage and motherhood penalty. That actually it is the marriage important thing that puts so much pressure on women that they are asked that all the household work, which is work, but it becomes the kind of duty and they have to perform that duty. And we find in all these policies since the 50s, they were wrapped in the framework of the household responsibility. Women have to be liberated, but they have to do that. That was one of the things that was mainly responsible. Women were deprived of independent right to resources, discrimination against married out and divorced women by village governance. There are a lot of kind of studies and anecdotal evidence which says that how married women, married out girls and the divorced women, they are really neglected by the village governance, and they are discriminated in terms of land. There is shortage of land. They are marrying out. They do not belong to this government. All kind of excuses. And family and village governance both combined. Both are responsible for this, and this has been ignored. So in conclusion, I would say that two things: laws and policies were influenced by Confucian ideology right from the beginning and even in the present system. What do I mean by Confucian ideology? There was this kind of promotion of the how man being the patriarch, and he's the head of the household. China did not have earlier the head of the household, but now we repeatedly see the concept of male as the head of the household, and that plays a big role in the village rules, norms, and traditional marriage system. That is he is seen as the kind of axis around which the family revolves. So women has to be identified either with her husband or father, and that is the surname she takes, father's surname and husband's residence. So they don't have they have independent names, but that is of course the father's residence, father's name, and then there are kind of the husband's residence that decides her where she is living. Now these determine her inheritance rights, distribution of the system of property, particularly I'm referring to the land in agricultural areas, and the legal ambiguity about these contributions. There is total ambiguity about these contributions. So if we read the 2022 law and the policies made at the UN conferences by the party and the state leaders, then we find that such a kind of progressive statements are made. But women's contributions are not recognized. They are not given independent land rights in their own name. So a local saying goes that a woman is no person. Nose person. She has these nose around her. No land, no house, and no money. I mean, this is I have translated it from Chinese, or we have translated it from Chinese. So this, in conclusion, would be, and something that present system that women are facing even today, that with all kind of liberation that continues and promoted, including the gender equality within home and outside, one responsibility comes: they have to produce children. There is a deficit of the population. So Cindy also referred why this kind of culture is changing, why women are rejecting marriage. This is the question that we are trying to find the answers. They are rejecting marriage because their whole independence is being compromised without any substantial kind of rights to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, 𝘾𝙗➡. And you pointed out the institutional constraints, legal silence, legal ambiguities, etc. That links well to our next speaker's chapter. Dr. 𝘾𝙗➡, could you give us an intro of your chapter as well in the court setting context?
Okay, thank you. Let me share my slide at first. Can you see my slide? All right. Okay. Thank you, Pen, and thank you, the publisher, World Scientific. And also, I would like to express my actually great gratitude to the Professor 𝘾𝙗➡. She is so enthusiastic and also determined to bring us together. So in our chapter, we actually try to explain from an institutional perspective to try to understand the judicial decision-making in divorce disputes in China. So we argue that even though the legal system regarding the women protection, the economic development, and even the cultural bias have been actually significantly changed in the last few decades, but women's status in the court still remain disadvantaged. So we from our article, we argue that the institutional constraints played a very significant role in trying to produce such gendered outcome. So we found that efficiency and the stability are the two major institutional constraints that will make the judges to make have disadvantaged decision making for the women in China. So regarding the efficiency, we know that in China, the judges are under the huge pressure to close the cases as soon as possible. And they normally will have a ranking system. So they are really actually concerned about that. The time and then also the cost that they have actually used to close one case. So the second concern for them is actually they need to also consider that whether the cases that they handled with will lead to some social instability. So for example, whether the case will lead to some malicious events. For example, someone may suicide, one of the party may kill others. So, in divorce cases, especially for those aggressive husbands, they may actually threat the judge that's saying that, okay, if you award a divorce, I'm gonna to kill her. So this becomes a very actually serious threat for those judges regarding their career risk. And so these are the two major constraints that we have highlighted in our chapter. And followed with the institutional constraints, we try to understand that how they actually influence on the judicial practices in the divorce disputes in different areas. So we first found that the Chinese judges try to actually always adopt the three routine approaches. So first, when they first actually take the divorce cases, they will first try to see that whether the settlement or the mediation are available by the two parties, because settlement or mediation are the safest way for them to close the cases without any lingering effects. So with the decline of the mediation in the Chinese courts, so they changed their strategy a little bit. So they normally will reject the petition from the first time, and then they will try to accept the divorce or award the divorce when the women or the husband come to the court for the second time. Sometimes when they actually handle with some stability threatening cases, they try to shift the individual responsibility to the collective responsibility, that is the adjudication committees. We also actually demonstrate that how the Chinese court and judges to handle with the issue of domestic violence. We found that they try to trivialize the domestic violence in both mediation and adjudication procedure. So for example, in a mediation procedure, of course, when the two parties can actually reach an agreement, that there's no need to highlight the domestic violence. While in the adjudication process, even though the two parties can provide some, even the women actually raise the concern about the domestic violence, and then the judges try to actually minimize or try to set up the barriers for them. So for example, the judge may say that, oh, you do not actually provide sufficient evidence for the domestic violence. So in this way, they are able to trivialize the domestic violence. And as I said, actually, the concern of the social stability play a very important role in trivialize the domestic violence. We also found that regarding the child custody, even though the Chinese law had actually adopted the international standard, the best interest of the child, but you can see that in practice, how they actually decide the child custody, they do not really check on the best interest of the child. Instead, they try to actually use the child custody as bargaining chips to force the women to accept some actually unfair award. So they may tell those wife saying that, okay, you do not have the sufficient financial condition to raise the kid, and with the kid, you will not be able to marry again. So why not you just give up your children? So this is how they actually manage with the child custody. And we also try to understand that how the Chinese judges deal with the property division. Even though in the civil code, it says the women will have the right to actually receive the property after the divorce, but then the judges practice actually try to disadvantage their status. So we also highlighted that because of this practice, and then it also changed the mindset of the lawyers, and majority of the lawyers also try to actually encourage or dismotivate the women to actually fight for their children custody and also the property division. And basically, it's because the court actually provides such signals to them. So in the end, we try to prove that actually institutional constraints are very important in Chinese court to lead to the gendered outcome. And we believe that if China actually would, if China would like to change the situation, they need to really change the evaluation system towards the judges. Yeah. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Hui-Na. And now, just on your presentation, Hui-Na, I have a simple question and would love you to respond to. Do you think, with greater involvement of women judges, women leaders may help improve these outcomes a little bit?
I know that actually there are some recent studies actually highlighted that the whether the female judges will really actually help the women actually like plaintiffs or the defendants. Actually, in our article, we also highlight that it won't help. It won't help because if you admit that institutional constraints are so important for them, so then no matter you are the women, the female judges, or you the male judges, you will still lead to the similar outcome. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. And can I ask Kelvin and Ritu, in your chapter on inequalities persist, that one, women's land rights, just to remind our audience. So despite a series of state laws aimed at safeguarding women's rights and promoting gender equality, so male-centered village governance, as you argues, that continues to produce persistent gender inequality in practice. And that reveals a significant gap between national policy and local implementation. So how can this gap between policy and practice be effectively addressed, in your opinion?
Maybe I begin by answering, and Professor Kelkar can add one or two points. During the study, because I remember even we went for a field survey in a village in Yunnan, and the reason was that in the village governance level, in the decision-making level, still there is no women who can decide about the adjustment practices. So the problem is that earlier I remember there used to be a kind of a women's network, which was very popular, where they used to discuss about the women's voices, which became quite clear in terms of advocating women's rights to land. But those kind of a networking was mainly through the informal channels. But there was this kind of a voices available, and I remember in Beijing, as a part of Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, there was a Women and Law Society, which used to deal with a lot of issues which comes after the not so well legally implemented provisions, etc. So one would be which many women want a kind of a more decision-making authority in village government bodies, which is unfortunately not the case in China. Second is that the policymaker blame that women are not aware, but that is just a kind of excuse. Actually, every woman is aware of their rights. So how to make laws which can be implemented in a more clear manner, and as well as the right to women to go to the village authorities to ask for their right, which is possible only when women are considered as a part of the household. Because normally we say that women, daughters will be married out, so they don't need share, and wives are married in, so they don't get share in the land. So this whole picture of household framework, unless until that doesn't change and grant women as an independent actor, economic actor, so that policies are not going to be changed much. So therefore, unlike the urban areas where women can still have some kind of property rights, but I think rural areas, because agricultural land is limited, women are not getting compensation rights, women are not getting any kind of a housing rights. So this is going to be persist in case of rural areas. And if Professor Govind wants to say something.
You're on mute.
line what Ritu has said, that in complete agreement with her, what we have really argued for unmediated rights, not mediated by the household and the head of the household. So that is the independence of the women's right we are talking about. Only then it is possible. If the land is allocated to household and within women are framed as the subordinate beings of the household, then the policies do not go very far and they are more limited by the social norms. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. And I have a question for Cindy. So based on your, so Cindy writes about migration, marriage, and split households, if you remember. So, so based on your observations, Cindy, in the context of rural to urban migration, and extended family and intergenerational household arrangements have become increasingly common in rural areas. So, what are the gendered implications of this trend, particularly for women?
I think that as the younger generations participate, in migration, in rural-urban migration, we're seeing more diverse trajectories. We're seeing, for example, that young women start to participate in migration younger, skipping basically farming as an experience, and for both men and women. And we are also seeing more women aspiring to work, even though they might not be part of the rural-urban migration, but work nearer to the village in town. So I think there are also stories of young women hoping to really be wage earners rather than just being left behind at home. So I think the younger generation is showing aspirations that are quite different from the older generation. But I think, as Ritu and Govind have mentioned, I think there are structural constraints such as the fact that women leave their home, right, to move to their husband's family, and such as that they would no longer become sort of as daughters. Daughters are never really part of the permanent membership of the family, and they don't inherit the house, etc. So those structural constraints remain. And so I think that, yes, there is a generational difference, but I think those structural constraints continue to really limit the possibilities of women to own properties and really to exert their agency as much as they want. And I think that is the ultimate dilemma, because as women are improving in their educational attainment, the opportunities that they have really are not commensurate with their capacity or their educational and occupational attainment.
Great, thank you, Cindy. And just, when I'm reading Cindy's chapter and also Professor 𝘾𝙘𝙧𝙡 and Ritu's chapter, I can see that both highlight the profound and ongoing challenges for women and girls in rural China. So Cindy's work shows that while the family provides a crucial safety net for rural migrants, the intergenerational split household strategies often position women as the default carriers. So this in turn then deprives leftover women and girls of social and economic opportunities. And 𝘾𝙧 and Ritu's chapter reveals how marriage can become a penalty, systematically disadvantaging women in acquiring land rights under patriarchal village governance. And they also highlight how the voices of rural women are often overlooked and how they feel obligated to accept the status quo in the name of maintaining family harmony. So what's compelling is how both of your work point to a very similar painful fact, which is family itself can be a site of symbolic violence. So it's a space where gentle, invisible, yet pervasive practices of masculine domination compel rural women to make compromises, whether through unpaid care duties or the loss of land rights. So we know in many societies, marriage, family, they are idealized as sources of support and protection. Yet, for many rural Chinese women, this is far from the case. So this leads to my question for the three of you. So given that the family is a central locus of entrenched patriarchal norms, where we should, begin in addressing and mitigating. So, these challenges faced by rural Chinese women. So particularly in the domain of marriage and family, how can we actually begin to address and mitigate challenges faced by Chinese rural women?
Yeah. Who will go first? All right.
Okay.
I'll
Maybe
set the ball
yeah.
rolling. I think fundamental character of the family is very well defined by you, Professor Wan. The question is really that it is not only China. We face in India the same thing, South Asia and East Asia, same kind of similar, and to some extent in the West also, although problem has been kind of addressed a bit, but not much. The question is that the norms within the family are so patriarchal, and it is the patriarchal organizing of the family that is the problem. So fundamentally restructuring the patriarchy in terms of its organizational structure and the norms change within the family. That's why I stress on the norms. Now this is a little bit attention is being given by the development organization that unless we change the social norms, which are very gendered, no policy is going to be successful. Not only in China and rural China, but throughout. It's a question of global importance. But since we are looking at China, that's why we are focusing on China. If I have to take any society, we will really analyze on the same terms. But the question is that this needs to be fundamentally addressed because we are really discriminating, subordinating 50% of the population. And that is the major concern of the human rights, that is the major concern, development concern of productivity and ethical organization of any society. Thank you. Ritu, you with that kind of thing, please.
Okay,
Great, thanks
so
so much. Richard.
yeah.
Yep.
So, I think the change has to come from within, as Professor Kilkar also has argued, that something which cannot be imposed from above. So there was a lot of, for example, 50s to 2022, we have actually read all these laws. So there were some very progressive steps which have been taken by the state, clearly defining that women should have a right in terms of divorce, marriage, and widowhood, and also women should have a equal say in village organization. But when you go at the local level, you don't see much of these implementation. So I think and the reasons can be because there is a kind of a subordination at the state, at the local level, then family, then household. So it goes on. So unless until either women have this independent economic decision making power, which is not possible in terms of household. So, the one example is that, for example, in urban area, as Professor Cindy was saying, that women are deciding not to get married. So maybe that can be a kind of a wave towards new culture changes. In rural areas, we have heard of higher bride prices. The women are demanding for high bride price to get married. So therefore, there's a pressure on boys' family to generate some good income, bride prices for them. So demand has to come from within, and nothing can be imposed from above as such. This is what I'm trying to say.
Great, thank you. And Cindy.
Yes, that was a good question, but very difficult question to answer, and I would just answer it very quickly, and that is, I think property right is a policy instrument that that could be looked at. I think it's extremely difficult because the reason why sons are so prioritized, part of it's that the family line, right, is passed through the sons and not the daughters. And so is the property of the family, inheritance, the house, everything. So I think and I think that, in urban China, it's changing, right? I think parents are not as, stubborn, I would say, as previously in terms of they have to have a son. Many parents are okay, to have only a daughter or daughters. In rural China, it's a little different. It's a little bit more stubborn. But I think, if property right can be changed in such a manner that both sons and daughters inherit the same thing, I think that will really, it will be very, very difficult to do, but I think that change, if possible, would, I think, usher in something, some cultural change as well.
That's right. The cultural change, the social norms and structural inequalities, as you outlined, and also the patriarchal structure. And that will be quite challenging, probably not happening in the short term, but let's see and hope that will happen soon or later. So now we have one more speaker, actually, who is fixing the technical issues. I believe Professor Lan Yan is able to speak about her chapter now. Are you there, Lan Yan? Okay, yes, you are. I can see you. And are you ready to project your, share your screen with your slide and then give us a brief intro of your chapter on revisiting self-determination and equality in the Chinese socialist feminist pursuit?
Sorry, I don't have a good morning. I'm sorry, good evening to everyone. I don't have PowerPoints. Is it a required?
That's all right. Yeah, you can just briefly introduce your chapter and the key arguments if you like.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for organizing this book launch. Very, very honored to be part of it. My chapter is focused on the concept of self-determination, which is a very important principle I would consider in modern human history. And it's very important because it's started at the end of the First World War. So it was a principle that was brought forward in the international community to really recognize that the existence of human beings, they all have the entitlement to exercise self-determination, determine their own path, life course. And it's a principle that inspired the Chinese Revolution early on, especially led by the Chinese Communist Party. And at the same time, it was also a key goal, I would say, that was adopted by the women's movement at the early decades of the 20th century. The term for self-determination in Chinese is 自治 and 自立. So 自治 and 自立, they were popular slogans during the early 20th century women's movement as part of the May 4th movement in modern Chinese history. Now, the argument, of course, is that in today's pursuit of socialist feminist movement, this equality is very much in the center of the focus. However, self-determination as a condition for equality has somehow peculiarly absent. So therefore, has been absent. So therefore, the question is, why is it absent? So my chapter is about why is it absent, and what's the consequence and impact of its absence. The reason it's absence, and I really wanted to pick up on what other people have saying that women have exercised agency with respect to their choice of life, whether to be married or not to married, with whom, or and so on, have children, not to have children. But to address the fundamental current issues, such as the decline of childbirth, fertility rate, and at the same time of the social inequalities that all the other chapters, all the authors have identified, I would say is the very question of the absence of self-determination. Self-determination existed among Chinese in the ancient cultures as well. Throughout the history, the women try to gain their independence and define arranged marriage, refuse arranged marriages. But it is also a concept very much rooted in the international feminist movement. And so therefore, the commonalities of the use of this very much principle is, of course, for women gain self-determination in order to define their own life paths and their life course. And this is very much significant because this very much the right of self-determination is women's, I would say, a weapon to gain independence, particularly with respect to the very question of social inequalities. Women exercise agency to overcome inequality, but then we all know all across the world, social inequalities are a systemic issue. To truly address this systemic issue, needed a government, needed women's collaborative efforts to come together to encourage government to adopt policies, right, to recognize self-determination, because the current policies that are certainly at the core of systemic barriers to women's equality, because they truly embarked upon capitalist market system. And at the same time, as people also earlier, other authors have pointed out, right, truly also propagate the traditional family systems, both which, as you say, oppress women, and certainly disregard women's contributions to not only to production, but also to the process of social reproduction, simply because in the process of production, whereby male dominate and really draw interest and benefit from the process of production. And so therefore the ruling elites would just be happy, not just in developing countries represented here in this webinar, in this panel, but also in countries like where I stand in Canada, right?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lan Yan. Just on that point, as our authors also talk about rural women and how vulnerable they are and the structural inequalities and the gender-based inequalities. So what measures can be taken then to strengthen rural women's capacity for self-determination, 自治,自立, in your opinion?
Yeah, certainly, I agree with all other people saying the self-agency, right, movement coming from within, the strength. But at the same time, very significantly, the organization of women coming together to exercise a political voice is very important. And the pressure for government to adopt policies to recognize self-determination, 自治, right, it's very significant. And there are tools and that people can draw upon. And I think there are some key concepts of this. 自治 is important. At the same time, I would say family I'm not against family, not rooted in the traditional family system, but to overcome the gender-based oppressions, right? That's part of the traditional patriarchal systems, family systems, is to encourage people to really recognize that women, I would say, the use of consent. So in this case, I would like to introduce that the International Women's Collaborative Research and the collaboration amongst different women's movement is very important. And in this case, I think not just simply women in the rural areas, in urban areas, in other countries, feminist researchers, but particularly come in coalition with movements such as social justice, indigenous struggles, and as well as climate change, environmental protections come all together. I think there are some concepts because self-determination is rooted in all of this social movements. And the other aspect, which I think also important, is consent. And I guess I didn't really highlight in the chapter, but I should. And it's highlighted in other writings that are under review, is for self-determination to be really exercised within family. And of course, consent is very important.
Yes, I totally agree. Thank you. Thanks so much, Lei.
Thank you.
And I believe people may have some questions they really want to ask our speakers. So let's have a look. Amy, can you see any questions coming in?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Cindy, go. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Hui-Na. My understanding, I think it's very fascinating, your research and argument, but I want to just seek a clarification. It sounds to me that your argument has more to do with the judicial practices, like how the lawyers actually practice law, and more about that than the law itself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, actually, in our chapter, we focus more on the judge's behavior in the Chinese courts. We do have a small section to actually explain that how the lawyers actually dismotivate the women to actually pursue their legal rights. So yeah, you are right. We are not only checking on that what the law has been written on the book, and actually we admit that actually last 3 decades had witnessed a great development in the legal system regarding the women's rights protection in the different area. For example, the land rights protection and also the property division. But we are more interested in like checking looking at that how the law is actually practiced. And then we believe that the Chinese court is actually a very important place and the region that we need to actually explore more. So actually this chapter is mainly based on the empirical study, exploring that how the Chinese judges, their mindset, how the efficiency, the concepts of the efficiency and the social stability will actually shape their mindset in the judicial decision making. So yes, we try to actually understand and we focus more on the law in practice. Yeah.
Is there anyone else wants to respond?
Yeah, maybe just to, because I also became curious now. Hui-Na, is the lawyer is a very, attractive profession among women? Do you see more women lawyers in China, or is it more male who opt for a lawyer as a profession?
All right. Actually, I do not have the data, like the specific data, to show that the really portion of the percentage of the male lawyers or the female lawyers. But you can see that actually in the majority of the law schools, there are more female students than the male students. So I do not see that there has a very big difference between the number of the female or the male lawyers. I would say that around me, I also have a lot of like friends that they are the female lawyers, and then they are quite successful. Right.
So now there's one question from our audience, Karina,
All right.
who asks, could women challenge the local court's decision by appealing to a higher, which means more central court level?
Oh, could women challenge the local court's decision by appealing to a higher or more central court level? Yeah, definitely, because this is their rights to appeal. And as you know that in China, that each case actually can go through maximum 2 trials. So if the actually women is unsatisfied with the decisions, they can definitely appeal. But in our chapter, we mentioned that because of such institutional constraints, even you appeal to the higher court, the judges will still fear, they will still are afraid of handling with the cases, such as the stability threatening cases. For example, if the husband is really aggressive, and then they threat that, okay, if you actually award the divorce, I'm gonna to kill you or gonna to cut your fingers, something like that. So then, you know, actually there do have a lot of cases that the judges actually were under the threat by the plaintiffs or the defendants. So, you know, they, even though they can challenge the local court's decision by appealing, but we doubt that the result will have so big difference, especially the judges are afraid of actually offending some aggressive parties in the divorce disputes.
Great, thank you, Huina. Are there other questions? I don't see other questions coming in, and I'm conscious of time. So it's been an hour. I feel, you know, we can still keep discussing this topic forever. And so I'd like to really thank all of our book chapter authors, and you know, for everyone has outlined, or you know, the persistent gender inequalities, different types of gender inequalities in China, old and new, at both local and national level, inside and outside family, and also the possible solutions that people shared to challenge these. So yeah, and Amy, would you like to wrap up as well?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pen-Wang. I just want to congratulate everyone again on the publication of the book, and thank you again for taking the time just to share about your chapters. I think all of us here had a very fun time just asking each other questions and revealing more about our research. And I really do hope that as we continue to promote this book to university libraries and bookstores, that your research will also continue to be very impactful in the area of China studies, especially in the area of women. So now I would also like to promote an upcoming event by Dr. Ritu and Dr. Govind that will be happening in India. It will also be another panel discussion to discuss the challenges of modern women in 21st century China. So what we will do for that is also World Scientific will also be glad to play a part in recording the event and also uploading it online. And with that, I would like to end the book launch event and thank everyone for their time. There will be a link for everyone's video to be submitted to you after this event. And then we'll also follow up with the discount code as well as the link to where you can purchase the book. Thank you again. Thank you. You can log off now. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good morning.
Good night.
Have a great
Good
day.
morning. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.